Welcome to Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth, the podcast where we explore the beautiful, messy and transformative magic that happens when we dare to go within. I'm your host, Robin Harris, and in each episode we'll dive into real, honest stories from people who've faced their fears, embraced their vulnerabilities and discovered unexpected growth in their personal lives, careers, or businesses. This is a space for deep listening, open hearts, and soul-nourishing conversations. Because when we meet ourselves in our rawest moments, that's often where our greatest wisdom starts. Let's begin. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. And today I am delighted to have Kay with me, Kay Downie. And Kay has just reminded me that we have known each other for at least 6 years. I hadn't realised it was so long. It's that weird COVID time that just kind of concertinas and was it pre-post? Let's not go down that rabbit hole. But to introduce Kay, Kay describes herself as someone who has experienced the dark side of life and now leads those who wish to exit this way of living towards the lighter side. She spent a good portion of life living in a way she thought others wanted her to live, but in her 50s found that when she believed in herself, doors opened. And she now uses these experiences to help others believe in themselves and their lives accordingly. And that just sounds like magic to me, Kay. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Robin. And it feels like magic sometimes.
Absolutely. And as you know, if you've watched these podcasts before, I always start with 3 questions just to help us all tune in. So, Kay, let's start with, what makes your story relatable for others?
I think what makes my story relatable to others is other people are living that and probably feeling exactly as I did at the time, that they're the only one it's happening to.
That is so true. And who do you feel will gain the most from listening to this conversation?
There's several areas of people that I can help, and that's mums with empty nests, mums who've just had babies, and anybody who has had trauma, so they may have been in the services or had some other kind of trauma in their lives. I can help them as well.
So often transition points I'm hearing there, yeah. and those times of deep challenge.
Yes, definitely.
And what do you hope people are going to take away from listening into this conversation?
I think the main thing I'd like them to take away is that the person that's most important in their lives is the one that they put at the bottom of the pile, and that's themselves.
And to know that we're not alone in this, because like you said right at the beginning there, so often that's what we feel. I'm the only one. And that was one of the reasons for starting this podcast. It's vulnerability, introspection and growth, because that vulnerability, the thing that we don't want people to see quite often, because in our society it's quite often alongside of shame. And so we don't want people to see it because we feel shamed. But it's still the thing that connects us. It's the thing that makes us human. And when we're able to say, this is how I feel, other people are going to go, I feel that way too. I've always thought I was the only one. And it's that kind of thing where we don't want to say, that's wonderful that you're feeling it too, but I'm so glad that you are, because then I'm not alone.
Yeah, I get people say to me, because I at the moment I've been sharing my journey on LinkedIn, and people say to me, that must have been horrible, that must have been this, that, and I can in all honesty say, because I've been out of that dark place for so long now, it's like talking about a third person. I'm not talking about me, although I am talking about me. it was horrible at the time, but now I'm so grateful that I had that journey because look at what it's opened up for me to do for other people.
Exactly. Yes. And it's that it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Yes. And we started off with your bio and how you describe yourself as somebody who's experienced the dark side of life.
Mm.
So, would you be happy to tell us a little bit more about what that was like for you and how it has fueled your passion for supporting others?
As we said, it was I was in my 50s when I came into the lighter side of life. I was an only child and a youngest of three. My mum and dad only had me, but my mum already had two older children. Um, my dad put my brother and my sister on a pedestal, although they didn't live with us. They were the bee's knees. I was put down. I was the brainier of the three of us. I wasn't brainy, but I was the brainier of the three of us. Um, but I was always put down. And it was a case of I should be seen and not heard. Um, I had to do things his way. He would move the goalposts. Consequently, when I was 18, he gave me an ultimatum. I either went to see the guy that I was going to see and didn't don't not return home or stay home and not go and see him. I was 18. I think you can guess what I did, Robin. I went and seen him. And I got married a couple of months later. They weren't happy with that, my parents. They drip fed me all the time. So my marriage lasted a year, but we had to stay married for 3 years because that was the law in those days. And we divorced. I went home for a little while. Nothing changed. Nothing had changed. I was still being treated in exactly the same way. And I got married again. Only this time I didn't get married for love. I got married for convenience. And whilst I was with my second husband, I met my first husband again, and we had planned to leave our partners and go back together. And he drowned. So there's another dark side. I had depression. My first husband drowns. I'm left with my second husband, and I had this great gaping hole. What was I going to do? So I decided to have a baby. My baby is 46 in May. But I had a baby, much against my mother's wishes. My mum said that, babies can make or break a marriage, Kay, and I think it will break yours. Well, he didn't break my marriage as a baby, but when he was 7 years old, then the marriage did break down. Should have broken down when he was a baby. My husband have then told my mum, you can keep him if you want. Don't want him, you can have him. But she thought he was just messing about, so never told me. If she had, she'd have saved me quite a few beatings. But she never knew that I was being beaten until my marriage broke down because I never told her. So when my son was 7, I divorced again. And for a little while, a very, very short period of time, I suppose I walked on the lighter side of life because I had nobody putting any pressure on me. My son went away to boarding school because he had learning difficulties or behavior problems, should I say. And these days he'd have been classed as autistic or ADHD, but in those days that didn't exist. So I was on my own most of the time, and it was bliss. But I was working with a young lady who was from Canada. She recently got divorced as well. And she said, why don't we join a dating agency, Kate? You join one and I'll join the other and we can compare them. So I thought, it's not going to do any harm. I got my money's worth from going out with different people for dinner. Um, and then I had this phone call from a Welshman. And I said, oh, no, I'm sorry, I can't. I said, I got 2 or 3 dates already in my diary. I can't add you as well. That wouldn't be fair. So we hung up on the phone and that was it because it was not online dating agencies, it was face to face sort of thing. But I couldn't get that voice out of my head. I went to work the next day, could not shift it. So I thought, oh, well, there's only one thing to do. I'm going to have to see him. So I phoned him up and I greeted him with, "Have you come down out of Cloud 9 yet? Because I haven't." That was 37 years ago, Robin. We're still together. I've got another baby, but this baby is going in 36 this year, not, she's quite, there's a big age gap. Um, and I took him to hell and back again because he had no idea that I had any problems. As I said, I was walking on the light side for just that little bit. And that's the side of me that he's seen. But once my baby came along, the depression came back and it was full-blown depression, not postnatal depression. And I seen a counsellor who was fantastic. So I had another little gap until my daughter started school. And then my son's school decided that it would be a good idea for me to go and see a counsellor because the issues that my son was having were my issues, not his. Well, I'd had such a wonderful experience. I had no thoughts of not going to see this counsellor, but it was a man this time, and I dare say he was a good counsellor, but not for me.
And this is the
He
thing,
had
we need to find a good fit, don't we? Because otherwise it can be traumatic in itself.
Well, he had an agenda as well, because the school wanted him to prove that I was the problem.
So he wasn't actually your counsellor, he was working on behalf of the school.
So I was going to my daughter's school, telling the mums at the gate that I was going to drive off the Severn Bridge. And one of them, luckily for me, was a counsellor. She was counsellor to drug addicts. And she came up to me and she said, "Kay, whoever it is you're seeing, will you please stop?" And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because one day you're not going to say to us, well, girls, here goes, I'm going to drive off the Severn Bridge." And we'll think, "Thank God for that. She's come out the other side." But you won't have. You'll have driven off the Severn Bridge and we'll hear it on the 6 o'clock news. It frightened me to death.
Yeah.
And I stopped.
Which is
Because
possibly her aim. Give you a little wake up call.
And I told my husband I wasn't going to see this guy anymore, and it caused a lot of arguments because I was now back to square one. I was in the depths of despair, far darker than I had been up until that point. So we lived like that until my daughter was 13. Now, obviously, I didn't get my husband's voice out of my head because he's a Welshman and he comes from Pembrey originally. And my mum said to me when my father-in-law passed away, "Kay, you and Ian are always talking about going to live in Wales when you retire." So we were in our late 40s, I suppose, by this time. And I said, "But Mum, we're nowhere near retirement age." And she said, "I don't care. You need to tell Ian, I've seen a programme and you need to buy a house over in Wales now." She was right, as it turned out. We paid £80,000 for a bungalow that's worth over £200,000 now. So she was dead right on what she was saying. And when I came over for the funeral, I mentioned it to my husband's sisters, my sister's husband, my sister-in-law's husband, that my mum had said, and he said, "Tell him. The rest is history." So my husband worked in Bristol, and he couldn't get an equivalent job over here. Now, if we were round about your area, he probably would have commuted every day. But I'm right over the other side of Wales to you. And it was good 2.5 hours, about 5 hours a day, probably. So he said, "We're going to have to buy somewhere in Bristol for me to live in as well." So we did. We downsized in Bristol, bought over here, and I moved over with depression and a 13-year-old daughter. I was probably going through my menopause, and she was just coming into her monthly cycles. It was fun, Robin.
You stacked it all.
I did. And then to top it all, I had an argument with her after working for a company over here for about 13 months. I had an argument with her on a Friday evening. She wouldn't come to Bristol with me. She went and stayed with friends. I went up still, in a mood, come back in a mood on the Monday morning, went straight to work and answered my boss back and got sacked on the spot. That wasn't the worst part. When I got in my car and started driving home, I realized I'd left my house keys in Bristol. So I had to go to my mother-in-law's, who had a spare key. So we ended up sitting down together and crying together, her because of her husband and me because of my job. But that was a case of that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because the next day I got a phone call from Carmarthenshire County Council asking me to go for an interview. Now, if I'd still been working with the company that I got sacked from, I would never have been able to go on for that interview because they wouldn't have given me a time off. So that was the beginning of me working for the council, and I worked for them for over 10 years. Um, and that's where things started to change. Not immediately. Not immediately. I worked in Carmarthen for the first 6 months of my contract, and then I was transferred up to Llandeilo, where I met a young lady called Sue. And Sue said to me, Kay, come to the spiritualist church with me on a Monday night. And I said, I don't want to go to no flipping church. I said, I've had enough of church. I said, I've been a Sunday school teacher and this, I said, and it's not helped me at all. And that's how I was. I was really ooh in those days. And she said, I don't want you to come because of the church. I want you to come because I want you to break the cycle of coming to work, going home and arguing with your daughter, going to bed, coming to work and just going round and round in circles.
I
When
love that you've brought that up because I was just talking this morning with somebody. We get into those cycles, and when we don't see them or we don't see a way out, it's
no,
never going to break.
no,
It's that pattern interrupt, and it's finding someone or having being able to hold faith in ourselves, like finding someone who can hold faith for us or finding faith in ourselves, that we can do whatever it takes to interrupt that pattern. I was saying, even just to think of it like a big button,
yeah.
press pause
Mm.
and do something, even if it's only get up and walk around, go outside for a breath of air, breathe,
And make
anything
some
just to
spaces.
shift that.
Because I didn't know what I was doing. I
No.
didn't have a clue. Um, I must have been horrible because my daughter did actually ask my husband, why did he marry me? Because I was such a horrible person. But I did go to the church. It did break the pattern. And that whilst there, I agreed to sit in circle with a medium. Now, I'm not a type of person that will just use something. If I'm going to get involved, I'll get involved. So I was sitting in this circle with this medium, and slowly things were changing in my mind. I didn't realize it at the time. I do now. And I was frightened of cats. One had scrammed me as a baby in a pram. So I was scared stiff of cats. I could sense them coming down a blind alley. That's how frightened I was. And I started dreaming about cats. And I told this medium, her name was Audrey. I said, Audrey, I'm dreaming about cats. She said, well, Spirit is telling you, Kay, that you need to get a cat. And I said, I can't get a cat, Audrey. I said, I'm petrified of them. If it comes near me when I'm going to feed it, I'm likely to drop the food and run. She said, I don't care. They're trying to tell you to get a cat. Anyway, the first cat I dreamt about was a tabby cat. Now, my husband had a tabby cat as a child, and he was a bit sick that we couldn't have a cat because of me. And the second cat I dreamt about was a ginger. So I told my husband what Audrey said about going to get a cat, and he said, well, I'm up for it. So he said, but I want a tomcat. So I said, okay, we'll go looking for, I thought we'd have a ginger tom. So he said, okay. We went to Llisnynny, a cattery not far from where I'm living. And there was a ginger cat in there, and they were trying to get out of their glass, the glass on their cage. And I thought, I can't have that. That would, it would freak me out. Anyway, I found one near to where I worked, and I walked through this big sea of cats. If there was one cat, there was 100 cats there, just walking around. And I walked through them. They told me I was going to see a ginger tom. Well, I didn't go to see a ginger tom. It was black and white. And unbeknownst to me at that time, it was a black and white cat that scratched me. So I wanted to run. So this woman said to me, but you told me, Kay, that you'd overcome your fear. I said, well, I must have. I've just walked through all those flipping cats out there. It's just that one I don't want to be near it. So she said, well, I've got just the cat for you. And it was a silver tortoiseshell female cat. This was in the January. We were going on a cruise in the March, and so we thought it would be unfair to take her home until we come back from the cruise. So that's what we did. I went to and sat with her. My husband came and sat with her. She actually attacked my husband, and I thought, that's it. He's going to say no more. But he thought it was good. She had a bit of life in her. But she was more like a dog than a cat. She followed me around like a dog. So a bit later on in the June, the farm up the road from where we live here had kittens free to a good home, a ginger Tom kitten. So I told my husband about it, and he said, "No, we've got a cat. We don't need another one." Anyway, that was on the Friday. He went back to work on the Monday, and he emailed me and said, "If that kitten is still there, go and get it." So we did. We went and got the kitten, and we lost him just before Christmas. He was 15, 16 years old, something like that, by the time he went. And
That's a
he went
really good
overnight.
age for a cat.
He went overnight. He went from being quite a sprightly old man to he couldn't move. He couldn't move his hindquarters. So he had to be, it was the kindest thing to do because they said he would be in a lot of pain. But the first cat went before him. When she was a kitten, she'd been thrown out of a car and she either died from a stroke or a blood clot. She lived with us for 7 years. So we think it possibly could have been the length of time it took the blood clot to get around her body to her brain. So she was gone, and we decided no more. But Garfield, the ginger Tom, and me missed her dreadfully. So we got another cat called Cindy, who was a waste of space altogether because she didn't want to be here. She wanted to be outside. She wasn't an indoor cat at all. I've just signed her over actually to my neighbour. My neighbour now owns her. So she's the only one around now. We're not having any more cats, dogs, or anything because of the situation I'm in at the moment. So yeah, so I did that with the medium. I did that with the church and the medium after I'd got the cat and said to her one day, "Audrey, I don't like me. I've decided I don't like me." It come about, I'd been watching myself arguing with my daughter. Now that sounds silly because I was actually in the argument, but I could see myself. It was like a third person looking in. It was really weird. And I didn't like it. I didn't like what I was seeing.
And I think quite often we have that when we're not being true to who we really are.
Mm.
Something in us can see that, wants to
Yeah.
wake us up to that.
Mm.
And whether it's in the moment
Yeah.
that we can kind of, what am I doing? And we
Mm.
can't seem to break out of it at the same time, or it's afterwards and we have that, oh, what did I do?
Mm.
But in that,
Absolutely.
there's also that realization of that's not me.
Mm.
That's not who I want to be. How
Mm.
do I get out of this? And whether or not we can see a way out, I
There
think
is a
that's
way.
quite a common sense of, I don't want to be this person. This isn't who I am.
Mm. And I think that's when we need to turn to somebody for help, really. Yes, we can do it by ourselves, but it's much easier if we do it with somebody else.
You need
So
someone
I
to
said,
hold that space. It's hard to both hold the space and do the work.
yes, absolutely. So Audrey said to me, "Who do you want to be then, Kay?" I said, "I want to be the 3-year-old little girl I was before my father came home from doing his national service and my life turned to darkness, basically." So she said, "Well, you can't be that little girl, can you, Kay?" And I got news for Audrey. I am that little girl.
She's
Um,
still in there. She just wants to come out.
but Audrey took the circle that I was sitting in to an academy in Swansea, which was for psychic and spiritual studies. And on their notice board was self-awareness course, starting whatever date it was. I can't remember, obviously. And I thought, that's what I need. I need that. And there was 3 other ladies in the circle that said the same thing. Audrey talked them out of it. She didn't talk me out of it because I was determined it was something that I knew I needed to do. So I joined it, and Audrey had tried to get me to learn to read the tarot cards whilst I was in her circle, and I'd thrown them in the bin. It's good for a tarot card reader, isn't it? Yeah, I threw the tarot cards in the bin. And there was a lady on this self-awareness course that was going to do a tarot card workshop. And soon, the lady that got me to go to the spiritualist church wanted to learn to read the tarot cards. So I told her about this workshop. She said, "Well, I'll go if you go." I said, "I don't want to go. I threw my tarot cards in the bin." She said, "I don't care. I'm not going unless you go." And that was why it had come up, because it was me that had to learn to do the tarot.
Isn't
So
it
I did.
fascinating how, I mean, they say that what is for us
Comes to
will
us.
not miss us. It'll come for us from lots of different angles. And when we're ready for it, it'll be there.
Well, they were definitely, it was definitely the universe's wish for me to learn to read the tarot. So I did the tarot, and another lady that I knew intellectually, she said to me, "Kay, when you read the tarot cards, you're not actually reading the tarot cards, you're coaching." So I said, "Am I?" She said, "Yeah, go and get qualified." I said, "I wouldn't know where to start." "Go and do an NLP course," she said. So I'd not long retired, which gave me the money to pay for the NLP course. So I went on the NLP course and I didn't like it. It didn't fit with me. It was too much like the self-awareness course that I'd just done. And it just didn't sit with me at all. I passed my NLP certificate, but I didn't want it. And the tutor said to me, "Kay, I know you didn't like NLP." She said, "But I'm going to be doing a course called Kinetic Shift. And it's a 1 day course." My first question was, "How much is it going to cost me?" Thinking, I've just paid out about 2.5 grand. It was about £250. Peanuts when you think about it in.
Yeah, 10% of what you'd already paid.
So I said, "Okay, then put me down for it." So when I got there, I said to her, "What are we going to work on then?" She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, we just worked on my depression. My depression's gone." Famous last words, it hadn't. Um, she said, "We've got an arthritic hip. We'll work on your arthritic hip." So I said, "Fair enough." So, we worked on each other, students working on each other. And I can, in all honesty, say, Robin, when I went into that workshop, I was that big fat Russian doll with all those little dolls inside. When I came out of that workshop, I was that little tiny Russian doll. My depression had gone 100%, 100%, and it has stayed gone. I'm not saying I don't have off days, because I do. We all have off days, but I've never gone back down that windy, horrible, slippery slope that I've been down a few times. And I made a promise, and I made it out loud, that between that day and the day that I draw my final breath, I will help as many people as I can. So that's a little bit of my journey.
It's a wonderful story. And I love how when we've had a shift like that, because that shift from that dark, horrible place where you do think it's only you, because I was in my own a while back, and coming out of that, all you want to do is tell people, it's okay.
Mm.
You're okay. There's nothing wrong with you.
Mm.
Something has happened to you. And there
People
is
were
still
asking
that
me.
little
They were
3 year old.
asking me because I'd gone from being defensive, aggressive, nasty piece of work, if you like, to being somebody who didn't have a care in the world. Obviously, I did, but
Yeah,
that was the
relatively speaking. And it's not the same kind of care, is it? It's a care that this is going
yeah.
to take some work, but I can do it, versus I'm totally swamped. I can't breathe in this. I can't find a way out. I can't move. But yeah, there's still that little 3 year old inside you who's still bursting with the ability, the capability to have fun.
Yeah. And
And
I mean,
it's taking those layers off. Yeah.
for me, it was compounded as well, because as I came out of my depression, and it started when my mum died. My son decided he didn't want me to be his mum anymore, and he told me straight and plain I wasn't his mother, which is pretty impossible, because I gave birth to him. Um, and I just let him go, much to my father's annoyance. That gave my father more tools to, press my buttons. But I let him go, and he went for about 10 years altogether, walking back into my life with a 2.5-year-old. He's now got that 2.5-year-old is going in 10, and there's a 5-year-old as well. But I had to cope with that as well. And as I came out of it completely, and I was just getting used to my life, my daughter had accepted who I was because it took her a long time to accept me today to what I was when she was growing up. And even today, there is times when she draws back on what I was like and thinks I'm like it still. And it's going to
And
be.
yeah, it's a big adjustment when somebody who's that close, because you are her mother and you will always be her mother, and you were there in that form in her early life. And quite often that sets up a pattern, doesn't it? As you know, you discovered from your own early life. So it's hard then to
Mm,
fit in. Where am I then? If you are now you
mm.
in your best self, who am I in relation to that? Because that's not how I used to know you. So I have to re-find myself in order to find where we fit now. That's a challenge.
It is a challenge, but she's coming out of it now. But just as she was beginning to get used to me, my son came back into my life and wanted to dump everything that he was feeling onto me. My first thoughts was run away. He walked out of my life. Did I really deserve this? But there's something you can't change, Robin. Once a mum, always a mum. So I did meet up with him. I did let him dump it, but I was luckily enough, I had trained enough with NLP and kinetic shift to let it go over my head. I can't say we've got a wonderful relationship now because we haven't. He can't be bothered to get off his backside and come down to Wales. And he's pushed me away so many times I can't be bothered to go and see him. And I got to go and see him because I want to see his children. So it's difficult, but my daughter will have nothing to do with him whatsoever because she said I didn't deserve what he did to me. And I said, but he did it to me and I'm willing to forgive him. I don't care. I'll never forgive him though. And I think she means that, which is sad because they've only got each other, really, other than all right, he's got his own little family, but he's only got her other than that.
And there
But
is something special about a sibling. No
yeah,
matter what has happened between them,
mm,
there's still, because there'll always be siblings, just like you'll always be a parent, you'll always have a sibling. If you've got a sibling, they're always your sibling. But, and I think families are so challenging. The Chinese say, if you think you're, well, I think it's the Chinese, somebody says, you know, if you think you've got your life sorted, spend an hour with your family because they
absolutely.
are so close. Even if you don't feel close to them, energetically you're close to them, experientially you're close to them. You share so many memories in common, even if you don't see them from the same perspective. But you've been through a lot, time
And
wise, experience wise.
I can see it from their point of view as well, because as I said, I had older brother and an older sister from
Yeah.
my previous marriage. My sister's my sister died about 7 years ago now. But once my mum died, they went together and they pushed me out completely. They had nothing to do with me at all, and still have nothing to do with me. All right, my sister's dead, but my brother, apart from ringing me up to tell me my sister had died, hasn't spoken to me for over 20 years. And I can accept that. But I can also see how my daughter's going to feel in another 10 years' time, probably, when I'm not around and it's only her and her brother.
And yes, as a mother, that
But
hurts.
I can't do anything about it. They have to find their own level. And that was something that my father couldn't fathom out. Because once I did my self-awareness course, I told my father he was a bully. And I also told him I wouldn't go and look for my son. And he couldn't work that out. You're the adult, you should do this, you should do that. Well, when my son finally walked back into my life, it was in my father's flat. And my father sent him out to the kitchen to help me make a cup of tea, was his excuse. And I just looked at my son. I said, I'm going to say one thing to you, and then that's it. I'll make the tea and I'm gone. And he said, what? And I said, I will always love you. I won't always like you, but I will never stop loving you. There's one thing I will not do. I will not chase you. And I walked away. And he gradually came back into my life. And as I said, he's in my life now, but he's not because he can't be bothered to make an effort. And that's him. But yeah.
We all have our own
Yeah,
paths to walk and navigate and learn from. And
absolutely.
whether somebody is our child or not, that doesn't make that any different. Obviously, we wish the best for them as our child,
Yeah.
but we
But
cannot change things
he's an
for
adult.
them.
He's an adult and he has to live his life and I have to live mine. And in many ways, I suppose because of the way he is, it makes my decision in doing what we're doing much easier because we can just pack our bags and jump on that plane and not come back.
Yeah, in some ways that's easier, but I'm sure it's not easier in all ways. But I love the movie Eat, Pray, Love, the book Eat, Pray, Love, where the guy at the ashram tells, is it Elizabeth, to just think of him with love.
Yeah,
If you
just what I do.
cannot, if you cannot, she'd left the guy, it was her husband. If you can't stay married to him, just think of him with love, let him go.
Mm.
And the
And that,
Ho'oponopono
that
thing,
is a very good thing. I mean, as I said, I married the second time, not for love. I didn't love him at all. And by the time we broke up, I hated him because he had been so horrible. Um, and I wouldn't go to Frome in Somerset because that's where he went to live, and I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't drive through there because I knew if I saw him, I would use my car as a weapon, basically. And I wouldn't go there for a long, long time until I had done all that work on myself. And then my son was talking about getting married. He never did get married. And I said to him, if you want your dad there, I'm quite happy for your dad to be there and me to be there. I said, and he calls my husband dad. I said, and dad won't cause any problems either. If any problems are caused, it would be through your father. And he said, no, it's not the right place, mum. So on that score, I'd forgiven, hadn't forgotten. But his father obviously still had issues.
forgiveness isn't about excusing somebody else's behavior, is it? It's the fact that we come to see and understand that in carrying anger and hatred, we're the one that's being damaged. I love that analogy of holding the hot coal. Who's
Yes,
actually getting burnt?
yeah,
Myself.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I think the main thing is, I know now that I can't be responsible for anybody else. It took me a long time to realize that. I suppose in some ways that was what my father was doing. He was trying to be responsible for me when I needed to be responsible for myself. Once I took that responsibility for me, faced my father and told him he was a bully, obviously he denied it. Um, Things moved on, and there was a time, and people might hold this against me, they can, I don't mind. There was a time I wished my father dead. My father's 93 years old now, and I went to see him yesterday. He was curled up like a baby in his bed. He wouldn't speak to me. He sang. Don't ask me what he was singing, but he was singing something. He wouldn't speak to me. He wouldn't look at my daughter. He wouldn't do anything. He was just curled up. He's tired. He's had enough. And now I can honestly say I don't want him to die, but I know he's going to because of his age. But yes, things can turn around completely. I grew up hating my father, but my father won't die with me hating him.
And that's such a gift to him and to your own heart.
Mm.
And that sense of letting it, like putting that burden down, opening up your heart, that sense of spaciousness and that sense of, I'm not in a proud way, but I'm a bigger and stronger version of me than I was when I was curled up in my own defensive, fearful self.
Yes.
We need to, unfortunately, draw it to a close there. Thank you so much for all that you've shared and all those examples of where we can be in the darkest of times and feel like there is no way out, there is no hope, it's never going to change, I'm the only one, I'm all here on my own. And it can turn around. It can be what feels like complete opposite. So just if anybody is watching and you're feeling like you're in the darkest of dark places, there is something, and you've no idea how close that might be, that can turn things around. So please do feel free to reach out. As I've said before, it's not a weakness to reach out. If you're feeling that you really need help, you need somebody to hold that safe space for you, then reach out and ask for help, because as Kay has shown, it can totally transform your experience. So thank you again, Kay. And for those, oh, it's been a pleasure. For those who maybe are watching and thinking, gosh, this resonates so deeply for me, I would love to speak to Kay because she's been through what I'm going through. Where can people find you?
They can find me on Facebook. They can find me on LinkedIn. They can actually find me on YouTube. On YouTube, I do a small session called A Minute with Kay. So it's only a minute. At the moment, I'm doing the Fool's Journey. And that sometimes is all people need, is to hear about that Fool's Journey. They can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and they can find me on my website, which is kaydownie.co.uk.
And as always, I will put Kay's links in the notes below this video so that you have them there. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you've got any comments, any questions for either myself or Kay, do either stick them below or reach out to us just directly one-to-one. And if you have enjoyed this session, don't forget to hit subscribe, and maybe see you again next time. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. I hope it's given you a moment to breathe, reflect, and perhaps even see your own story with a little more compassion. If you find this conversation meaningful, I'd love it if you'd share, subscribe, or leave a review. It helps others find their way here too. Until next time, take gentle care, and remember, the journey inwards is where the real growth begins.